Waking up at 3 a.m. is not the problem. And I know that that might sound strange because the waking up is exactly what's been driving you crazy. But stay with me because the real reason you keep waking up at the same time every night has nothing to do with the wake up itself. Instead, it has everything to do with what happens in the seconds and minutes right after you wake up. And once you understand what your brain is actually doing in that moment, that is when your sleep starts to shift. I dealt with sleep issues for over a decade. I would literally lie there exhausted, frustrated, calculating how many hours I had left until I had to get up in the morning, and really ultimately convinced that something was wrong with me and with my sleep. And the more that I obsessed over my sleep, the worse it got. And it wasn't until I understood exactly what my brain was doing in those moments that I was finally able to break the pattern for good. And it's now been over 8 years since I've had any issues with my sleep. So in this video, I'm going to show you 5 things that are secretly keeping that 3 a.m. wake up pattern alive and exactly how to break each one. These are all important, but I want you to pay close attention to 2 of them. Number 2, because that's also the mistake that's been quietly training your brain to stay alert. And then also number 5, which is the reset that most people skip entirely, but is the thing that actually makes a huge difference to fall back asleep quickly. So let's start with number 1, which is that waking up is not always the real problem. Here's something that most people don't realize. Waking up briefly during the night is actually a completely normal part of your sleep cycle. Throughout the night, your brain naturally moves through cycles of deeper sleep and lighter sleep. And during those lighter phases of sleep, which tend to happen in the second half of the night, it's completely normal to notice that you wake up. For most people, this happens more fluidly. They consciously notice that they're awake, but their brain instantly registers that everything is safe. And so they drift right back to sleep. No big deal. But when you have insomnia or sleep anxiety, that wake up starts to feel more important. And the moment that you treat waking up as something bigger than it is, the moment that it becomes something to worry about, something that you feel that you have to fix, your brain takes note of that. And your brain goes, there's something important happening in this moment. So this moment matters. And anything that your brain decides matters, it pays even more attention to. And this leads us to number 2, which is the mistake that quietly teaches your brain to stay awake. Okay, this is a big one. So I want you to just kind of take a breath and sit with this one and do a reality check. Because this is a thing that most people are doing every single night without realizing it. When you wake up at 3 a.m., you do 3 things that make everything worse. You check, you fear, and you force. First, you check the clock. You check your body. You check whether you're still tired. You check how many hours you have left until your alarm goes off. Then the fear kicks in. Not again. How much sleep do I have left? What if I can't function tomorrow? Why does this keep happening to me? That spiral of worry and dread that hits the moment that you realize you're awake. And then you force, because at this point, you're so afraid of being awake and you're so convinced that every minute you're not sleeping is going to ruin your day tomorrow. So you'll do anything to make it stop. You either try to make sleep happen through sheer willpower, or you reach for a sleeping pill or a supplement because you feel like you just need something to knock you out and get you through the night. And I completely understand why you do all of this. I did the exact same thing for years, and it makes total logical sense. But here's what's actually happening from your brain's perspective. Every single time you check the clock and freak out about it, and then you try to force yourself back to sleep, you're sending your survival brain one very clear message, which is this moment is important. This moment requires attention. This moment is something to be alert for, which your brain interprets as, okay, got it. It's important to be on high alert at 3 a.m. And your survival brain responds the only way that it knows how. It stays alert and it keeps you awake because that's what you've been accidentally teaching it to do, even though you didn't mean to. The more that you monitor the wake up, the more important it becomes to your brain. The more that you fear it, the more your brain thinks there's something to be afraid of, so we must stay alert. And the more that you try to force your sleep, the harder falling back asleep becomes, even when you're completely exhausted. Quick side note, if you've been struggling with your sleep for months or years, you're definitely going to want to watch my free masterclass too. This is where I go deep into the exact strategy I teach my clients to end chronic insomnia for good, including the subconscious ways you've been accidentally sabotaging your sleep without even realizing it. That link is in the description. And this leads us to number 3, which is that your brain has learned to predict the wake up. Your brain is incredibly good at learning patterns, and the way that the survival brain works is really simple. If you keep worrying about something, it assumes there must be a real life or death reason to worry. So it starts perceiving that there's a genuine threat to your safety. It's not trying to make your life harder, it's just doing exactly what it was designed to do. So if 3 a.m. has repeatedly been followed by fear, frustration, worrying what time it is, that whole stress response, your brain starts to treat that time as something to monitor. And so it starts waking you up on purpose. Not because something is wrong with your body or because your sleep is broken, but because your survival brain learned this is a time that we need to be alert. And once this happens enough, it essentially turns into an automatic habit, a neural pathway in your brain that keeps firing at the same time every night. Because once your brain decides that 3 a.m. is important, it will keep waking you up for it. Basically, your brain starts expecting something at 3 a.m., so it wakes you up to check. Not because something is actually wrong, but because you've trained it to believe that something might be wrong. So then that's how one bad night of sleep becomes two, and then two bad nights becomes a week, and that turns into months. And before you know it, your brain has a habit of waking you up at the same exact time every night. But here's the really important thing to understand. This isn't a permanent situation. This is just a pattern that your survival brain learned because it thought that that's what it was supposed to do. But when you start to signal to your brain that the middle of the night isn't important anymore, that's when your sleep will start to shift. And to give you some inspiration that this really works, here are some testimonials from members of my sleep success program who were able to completely turn their sleep around. You can pause the video if you'd like to read through these. But even when people understand the pattern that's been happening, they usually fall into one more trap, which brings us to number 4, the false fix, trying harder. Because when you're struggling with your sleep, your brain does what it always does with a problem. It tries to solve it. So you start researching, maybe you buy a fancy new pillow, you try another supplement, you start tracking your sleep with a Whoop or an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring. You start to optimize your sleep environment down to the exact temperature. You follow every sleep hygiene rule perfectly. You keep searching for the one magic bullet that's finally going to fix this. And I get it because I lived this. And that's what we all do when something feels like a problem. We try harder, we try to optimize it, we want to take control of the situation. But here's the irony. Sleep is one of the few things in life that gets harder the more attention you put on it and the more you try to control it. The more pressure you put on sleep, the more your brain reads nighttime as something important to stay alert for. So the more you track your sleep, the more you analyze your sleep, the more you try to perfect your sleep, the more your brain confirms that sleep is a problem that requires its attention at night. And I know how this sounds like it makes no logical sense because we would think that your brain should want you to sleep. But your brain only understands 2 operating modes, safe or unsafe. And so now it thinks that the middle of the night is unsafe and it doesn't want you to sleep if there's an unsafe situation. And then another way that this can show up is from a little bit of a different perspective, but that constant checking the clock and counting how many hours you have left, that can make your brain think that the nighttime is like a test of sorts, a test that you need to pass. And so then the brain stays aware and alert, checking if you're still awake, which obviously just keeps you awake. So what should you do instead? That brings us to number 5, which is the reset that most people skip. Don't teach your brain sleep, teach it safety. This shift changes everything, and it's the one that most people never try because it feels completely counterintuitive. The goal tonight is not to convince yourself, I must fall back asleep right now. The goal is to teach your brain something more important, that this moment is safe, even if you're awake. Because your brain doesn't unlearn that 3 a.m. pattern through pressure. It unlearns it through repeated experiences of, okay, I can be awake at night and it's okay. I'm safe. Nothing bad is happening. So here's exactly what to do the next time you wake up at 3 a.m. First, don't make the wake up mean danger. The moment you wake up, catch that first thought before it spirals. So instead of not again or why is this happening, instead try something like, okay, I'm awake. Everything is fine. This is just a moment in the middle of the night. That's all it is. It's not so serious. This is about shifting into neutrality instead of spiraling into panic, because that first reaction is everything. It either tells your survival brain, threat detected, so stay alert, or it tells your survival brain, there's nothing to see here. we're fine to keep sleeping. Second is to stop checking for sleep. Put your phone down, cover the clock, ignore the time entirely, and you need to have patience. You need to learn how to allow time to pass without it meaning anything. Our world has turned into one of instant gratification, and that is working against you in the middle of the night. Have patience with your mind and your body, and remember that your only job right now is to rest, not to sleep, just to rest. Third is to give your brain a boring safety signal. This is so simple, but very powerful. So breathe more deeply, slow, deep breaths. Bring your mind back into the present moment by placing your attention on how cozy your bed is, the weight of your body laying there. You're not trying to force sleep. You're just practicing finding peace in the present moment. You're showing your survival brain, look where I am. I'm in my bed. I'm in my house. I'm comfortable. Everything is perfectly fine right now. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. Your brain starts to receive a different message at 3 a.m. So instead of, this is the time we need to be alert, it starts to learn, this is the time that we continue resting. And that internal alarm starts to go away. And the wake-ups become less frequent, less intense, and easier to drift back to sleep from if they do happen. Because your true self, the real you, is not threatened by being awake at 3 a.m. That's just your survival brain running an old automated pattern. And now that you can see it for what it is, you don't have to keep engaging with it. The hidden habit secretly powering your 3 a.m. wake-ups isn't the waking up itself. It's the checking, it's the fearing, and it's the forcing that comes after. So when you change that response, you change the pattern entirely. And if waking up at 3 a.m. has been going on for weeks or months, go watch this video next, because now that you understand what's been secretly keeping this pattern alive, this video shows you how to address it at the root so that your brain stops activating at 3 a.m. in the first place, and you can watch it right here.